Welcome to All About Art. My name is Alexandra, and I'm an art historian, curator, and writer. Within this podcast, topics relating to art history, cultural policy, the art sector, as well as a large range of other art-related topics will be covered. Conducting critical discussions, having entertaining exchanges, or just enjoying some relaxing chats, All About Art is where you'll find it all. Join me in exploring and developing cultural discourse. Welcome to another Hot Take Art Break episode, where I give my takes on topics in the art world happening right now. Today, I want to talk about the link between having a university degree in an art subject and how it prepares you for a job in the arts. Or better said, how it doesn't prepare you one bit. It's inspired by the latest interview episode with Eleanor and Amelia Stallworthy, who directed the Norman Rea Gallery, the only student-run gallery in the UK, which is located at the University of York. So go listen to that after this if you want to hear more about it. I will start off this episode with a little story time from my university days. I studied history of art at UCL, which was my first foray into the arts on a more serious level. I hadn't understood the industry or had any clue what sort of professional possibilities existed. So when I moved to London after an art history professor in high school ignited my love for the subject, I thought I was going to specialize in old masters and work at an auction house. At the time, not realizing what that would look like in reality. I did internships at galleries and museums and worked at Sotheby's auction house while I was studying, so I was getting exposed to the London art world more and more. At the end of my second year, I was on Facebook of all places and happened to see this event taking place that had to do with the newly formed Art Business Society at UCL. It turns out the two people that wanted to put the society together, quick shout out to Ginny and Lawrence here, needed a committee, but it wasn't going to be until the year after, which happened to be when they would have already graduated, that the society could fully function in its first official year. I involved myself in the initial formation of the society, and shortly thereafter, when it came to naming the president for the first full run, I was elected. I was excited and proud, but also a little bit scared, which I think was a good thing because it meant that I was challenging myself in ways that could allow me to grow. It also led me to make industry contacts that I still have with me 5 years down the line after graduating, and the society is still going strong. I went and held an event there late last year even. But I'm getting ahead of myself and telling you about all the good things that the society brought me, which was initiated by students, run by students, and encouraged by students. What I want to talk about is how an art history professor reacted to this society. In a matter completely separate to the society, I was in a professor's office to speak about one of my essays. I can't remember how the conversation actually came up, but I think that the professor brought up the society by saying something along the lines of, "Hey, have you heard that they're starting an art business society?" I had recently found out that I was the elected president for the following year, but I didn't say anything. I just nodded and said, "Yeah, I did hear that." And do you want to know what the professor said? They shook their head, scoffed, and said, "Gosh, we've been trying to distance ourselves from the art market for the last 100 years, and here they go starting something like this." I mean, what? I found this so incredibly problematic. You're telling me that you will not only not prepare your students for the realities of entering the workforce with an art history degree, but you will also look down on the students who try to find alternative routes to gain that education? That professor was also a curator at a huge institution in London, and I really respected them until they said that. I recognized right then and there that they probably had no clue what it meant to come from a background that didn't have exposure to culture early on, or that didn't offer a financial safety net when the first few jobs are unpaid internships to get your foot in the door. Let's look at some statistics which were published in recent years regarding who actually makes up the cultural industries. According to a report from the Sutton Trust, younger adults from working class backgrounds are 4 times less likely to work in the creative industries compared to their middle class peers. At 4 institutions, Oxford, Cambridge, King's College London, and Bath, more than half of the creative students come from upper middle class backgrounds. And I mean, it's just a hunch, but I'd bet good money that UCL is no different. When it comes to the wider workforce, one of the reasons I started my podcast is because, well, for one, I myself wanted to know more about what people do in the industry, but I was also seeing a lot of my classmates veer into other sectors, like doing law conversions or working for big consultants like KPMG or PwC. According to an article in The Guardian, and based on reports by the Creative Industries Policy and Evidence Center, 42% of the wider workforce in arts and culture come from middle-class backgrounds, and only 23% are from working-class backgrounds. Break that down to look at those in museums, archives, and libraries, and the numbers dwindle to only 5.2%. It's hard to find good surveys that break it down into commercial arts organizations as well, and I realize I'm looking at just the UK, where, in my opinion, the class divide is a bit more stark in comparison to other countries that I've lived and worked in. I could go on about why this has developed in this direction and why it's important to change it, but I will link a few resources in the show notes that I think could be useful if you want to continue down the rabbit hole of identifying the issues and thinking about how to solve them. There are 2 books that I really love for this. One of them is called Culture is Bad for You, and the other one is called Common Culture. As I said, I'll link them both in the show notes. Back to the issue at hand, and the issue I want to discuss in this episode is the fact that universities don't do anything about this problem. Here's the thing. Universities are perfectly happy to take your tuition money for 3 or 4 years while you study the Renaissance or contemporary theory. But when graduation rolls around, they basically pat you on the head and say, good luck out there. The disconnect is staggering. You'll spend entire semesters analyzing the socio-political contexts of the conceptual art movement, but nobody will tell you how gallery representation actually works, what an art advisor does, or how museums are funded. And I know that doesn't necessarily have to be a part of an art history degree. That would be more like art management or art business or cultural policy, similar to what I studied. But I still think people need to be prepared for entering the workforce. And it's not just that they don't teach these things. It's that many professors actively look down on students who show interest in the commercial side of the art world. As if wanting to understand how the industry actually functions somehow makes you less intellectually serious. It's not only unhelpful, it's actively harmful to students who need to pay their rent after they graduate. The irony is that these same professors who turn their noses up at, quote-unquote, the art market are often curators at major institutions, or maybe they're even consultants themselves. They're embedded in the very systems they pretend don't exist in the classroom. It's this weird cognitive dissonance where they benefit from understanding how the art world works professionally, but they won't pass that knowledge on to their students. So, what could universities actually do about this? I have some thoughts. First, they could introduce mandatory professional development modules. I'm talking about a semester-long course that covers the basics: how galleries operate, what different career paths look like, how to write a proper CV for the arts, interview skills, networking strategies. Make it as rigorous as any art history seminar, but focus on practical skills. Second, they could massively increase their engagement with career services. Most university careers departments are set up for traditional graduate paths like law, medicine, finance, maybe some corporate roles. They don't really know what to do with an art history student. And so I think that universities should hire career advisors who actually understand the creative industries, or at least bring in someone like an external recruitment agency to train their existing staff properly. Third, and I think this is quite crucial, they need to facilitate real industry connections. Not just the occasional guest lecture, but structured mentorship programs, industry shadowing opportunities, and maybe even partnerships with galleries, museums, auction houses, and art fairs. I know that during my degree at Goldsmiths, we had work placements, which were really, really cool. I didn't really get to benefit from it too much just because of the nature of me doing my master's during COVID, so there were a lot of lockdowns. But I think that it could be really beneficial in art history, either bachelor's degrees or master's degrees. Students need to see what these jobs actually look like day to day and not just hear about things in theory. I also think in terms of facilitating real industry connections, art history students, if they're studying at a university with a renowned fine arts program, should be connected with the art students. I don't know why UCL never did that with Slade. And here's something that I think could make a huge difference as well. If universities don't have the internal capacity to provide this support themselves, they should partner with external organizations that do. As I mentioned earlier, there are recruitment agencies. There are fantastic programs and professionals working outside of universities who specialize in arts career development, such as myself with NextGen, not to toot my own horn, but There's a reason why I created that program. The key is recognizing that preparing students for art careers requires a different approach to what we often see within art history degrees when it's fully focusing on theory. Now, I do think that, of course, if you're studying art history, the majority of what you're learning should be art history. It's very, very important to have that art historical base. I'm just saying to sprinkle in a little bit more career support so that when people graduate, they actually have a little bit more of a grasp on what they can do. It's about building networks, understanding unwritten rules, and developing some practical skills that you won't learn from reading Clement Greenberg. Look, I'm not saying that there should be a huge pivot in the curriculum. I do think that all the critical thinking, analytical skills, learning how to see, how to express what you see, and having that cultural knowledge that you get from studying art history, that's all incredibly valuable. But all of this shouldn't exist in a vacuum, completely divorced from the reality of what comes next. Students deserve better than being left to figure it out on their own, especially when the barriers to entry in the arts are already so high. Universities do have a responsibility to prepare their graduates for the world they're entering, not the ivory tower they're leaving. So that's my hot take for today. If you're a current student listening to this, I'd encourage you to be proactive about seeking out those opportunities, even if your university isn't providing them. And if you're working in the industry, think about how you can support the next generation, because the universities, I don't really think are doing enough just yet. Don't forget to check out my interview with Eleanor and Amelia about the Norman Ray Gallery for more thoughts on student-led initiatives in the arts. And as always, thank you so much for listening. And that is it for today on All About Art. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave me a rating or a review, as it helps more people discover the show. Also, feel free to share with your friends, or if you share on social media, tag me and get in touch. Thank you so much for listening.